In this video, I'll show you the number one reason companies start to stagnate once they reach a certain level, and more importantly, what to do to break through it. Now, this is not just theory. I've seen this with dozens of clients in the $10 to $50 million a year in revenue. And by applying the framework I'm about to show you, we were able to help them get back on track and start growing again. Now, if you're not in that revenue range yet, don't worry. What I'm about to show you applies at any growth stage, and it's never too early to start applying those best practices. When companies start growing, things are simpler. They typically run one experiment at a time, and it's very easy to see the result of that. Let me show you an example. Let's say a company is trying to improve their website conversion rate. And to do that, they decide that they will make some improvement to their checkout page, right? So they do a checkout redesign. It's normally very easy to figure out if it worked or not. First, because at that stage, they probably never did any sort of conversion rate optimization or very little. So the opportunities are massive, right? They could see a lift of 50% if their conversion rate overnight just with this new design, which is great. And if that happens, they know it's the checkout redesign because it's the only thing going on at that time that could have that big of an influence. However, there's a funny thing happening when a company starts to grow is they have more resource and more projects are going on at the same time. They might have a quiz, they might have a price change on some product, they might add a chat to the website, or they might have maybe a new marketing channel, right? So they have all of these things, and the worst part of that is since the company is bigger and probably has done a bunch of optimization to get there, they don't have 50% lift possible anymore. They're looking at much smaller opportunity. So maybe the quiz will reduce conversion rate by, let's say, 5%. And maybe the price change will lower conversion rate by another 10%. And maybe the checkout redesign, let's say plus 15%, the chat minus 5%, and the new marketing channel maybe plus 10%. Whatever those number sum up to, typically what most company will see is that the conversion rate dropped by 12%, but they don't know which of these opportunities, right? They're all trying to improve conversion rate. Everything here trying to improve conversion rate, but they don't know which project increased the conversion rate and which lowered it, right? All they see is that it lowered by 12%. And this is exactly at that moment that companies start to stagnate. What got them there, their way of doing, which was like one project to conversion rate, which was very easy to track, and also the numbers were much bigger. Now it's much more, you need much more sophisticated tracking to perceive those smaller change, like 5% here, 10% over there. So they lose track of what is working and what is not working. Okay, so what's the solution to that problem? Well, you can't simply just go back to having one project going on at the same time, because now each project can only increment the business by a very small percentage, since it's already you've already reached a certain milestone in your growth. So you need to have multiple projects going on at the same time if you want to continue growing fast and reach your goals. The solution is how you plan your project. And this is what we're gonna look at today, is how to plan your project in such a way that you learn from every single project and you have this feedback loop going on that will allow you to move faster and eliminate the losers and keep the winners. Now, before I show you the framework I use to plan project, I really want to take some time to address something that has been extremely difficult to get into executive head. I don't know why that is. I have my theory, but for now, I just want to make sure that I'm driving this point home because it's really important. And without understanding that, you won't apply this framework in your business because you'll feel that it's making you slow. So this is exactly what I want to address here, is that planning projects won't make you slower. Now, I don't know how that got into the head of most executive, that planning would make you slow. Maybe it was when Facebook was growing crazy fast and Mark Zuckerberg said that we move fast and we break things. But what most people don't realize is that Facebook was extremely good. They were extremely good at tracking every experiment that they would do. And that's exactly how they move so fast. So it was through planning and measurement that they grew so fast. It's completely the opposite of what people think. It's not just going at it and building stuff. It's careful measurement. And once you start learning from everything that the company does and you have this feedback loop, that's when you grow much faster than everyone else. So it's the opposite. Not planning is making you slow, and it is also killing your profit margin. And let me show you why it is killing your profit margin. Again, I'll show you the framework very shortly. I just want to make sure I drive this point home because you'll be amazed at how much money is being wasted by not planning and measuring correctly. All right, so here's how most companies that are stagnant are planning project, at least the one that I've worked with. So they start with a goal, typically very vague, right? So they have a vague goal, and let's say that's the starting point. And then the same way we kind of did this, they're going to find the opportunities they could be working on. Let's say the goal is to increase conversion rate. They're going to list what they could be working on: quiz, price change, checkout design, right? They list all of that. So this would be the part where they kind of find opportunities. Then they're going to pick a winner. So based maybe on budget and resource, they're going to decide which project they should tackle, right? So that would be to pick the winner. That's step number 3. And then they're going to plan and dispatch. However they do that at the company, it doesn't really matter. Then they choose the tool that they need to implement the solution. So if, let's say, they chose to implement the quiz, they would be looking at Typeform or, let's say, Google Form, right? So that's another step here. Then they build. If you're lucky, they're going to QA, and then they're going to launch and wait. And then typically what happens is over here, they're trying to do the analysis. And this is the very frustrating part of this whole process. Is this looks good, right? It's very structured, and at first glance, we don't see anything wrong with this until they're getting to the analysis part here, and they reach out to the analyst or the person that do their data analytics, and they ask that question like, hey, we launched a quiz on the website 2 months ago, and we'd like to know if that increased the conversion rate. And normally the analyst or whoever the person is will be like, the what? That person was never aware that they added a quiz on the website. Tracking was not implemented, and we don't have any result to say about this new quiz. And we could look at the overall conversion rate, again, if it increased. But as we saw earlier, this wouldn't tell us if the lift in conversion rate or the drop in conversion rate was due to other project going on. And this is extremely frustrating for the analyst, for everyone involved in that project that worked on that, and nobody knows if that worked. And sometimes they will just leave the quiz there and kind of live with that new reality that the website has a quiz without even realizing that the quiz actually drops their conversion rate by 5%, right? So earlier I said that this is killing your profit margin, and let me show you why. Look at this timeline here. Let's say that the problem was just because they didn't implement the tracking. Okay, so now we can kind of revert back. We wasted that time, which was the analysis time. Okay, we wasted that waiting time, but we implement the tracking and now we can wait another 2 months, and we only wasted that time, which isn't so bad. If that was the case, it would still be horrible, honestly, but salvageable. But now imagine that we realize when we're trying to implement the tracking and figure out a way to isolate the impact of that quiz on the conversion rate, that the tool was not correct. So now we have to go back to this step, because the tool does not allow for the tracking that we need. Let's say it doesn't have, you can't do cross-domain tracking, it has some weird redirection, and it's messing up with your web analytics data. Okay, so now we have to change the tool and rebuild the whole thing and wait again. That's pretty bad. And now imagine that you can't find something, or that when you're starting to think about measurement, you can't find a good way to isolate the impact of this whole project, which means that this project probably should have not even came to light at all, right? It should just have never happened, and you should have probably selected something else in that list that could have been measured in some way of another. So you wasted all of that time. And imagine every project in a company running on that framework. Well, they plan, build, wait, and then think about tracking. This is a lot of time lost, and time is money, and all of that. Like, this is only what a company is. It is projects going on, people working on projects. If your projects, you don't know if they bring something positive to the business, and you're constantly just doing stuff but never knowing what works and what doesn't, look at how slow this is making you compared to a company that would just add a little bit more time at the beginning of a project to plan it correctly on the measurement side, and compared to someone who does thing and never learn from them. This is what I want to show you how. I want to show you how to plan those projects correctly so that you can start growing again. Right? So that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to show you the framework. So let's get started on that. So I call this project planning with measurement in mind, and this can be applied to any project planning methodology. So here's how it works, right? So first, instead of starting with a vague goal, we want a SMART goal, right? A SMART goal. A SMART goal is a goal that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Now, if you don't know how to do that, I have other content on that. I'll add the link to the description. But basically, instead of saying we want to increase conversion rate, we're going to be saying increase conversion rate by 15% over the next 3 months. All right, so that's our goal. And now we're going through the same step, same process again. We're going to find the growth opportunities, possible project. Again, we're just listing things like that. It's the same. And then we are going to pick a winner. Now, when we pick a winner, now we're not just looking at resource and budget and things like that, but we're also looking at, is this measurable? How will we know that if the conversion rate increase or decrease, it is due to that specific project? To do so, here's a few questions you can ask yourself to decide what you're going to build. So for example, let's say you're trying to increase conversion rate by 15%. That's your goal, right? And you did all the work and you're left with two high impact possible project. One is to redesign product page, and the other one is to add testimonials to checkout page. All right. One caveat though, right? You know that in the next month, there's going to be a price change on your website on one of the most popular product that you have, and that high season is starting very soon. So it's a very important time of the year for your business. So you'll have to choose project that you know you can measure the impact and isolate the impact, that it won't be related to the price change or just because it's high season for your business, right? So you have to keep that in mind. So the question you can ask yourself is, first, what would success look like in quantifiable terms? Well, the goal is to increase conversion rate by 15%. So that would be by 15%, right? That would be the first question. Second is, how will we know that this project, redesign product page, the increase or decrease in conversion rate that we got was from that project and not the other things that are going on at the same time on the website, like the price change and the high season? Well, on the product page, we know that we can split test. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to run a split test. So even if it's high season, version A gets a better conversion rate than version B, we still know that it's due to the redesign and not just because it's high season. All right. Another question you should ask yourself is, what guardrail metric should we monitor to ensure that we're not solving a problem by causing another? What I mean by that is, sometimes, let's say you're so focused on increasing conversion rate that you're not realizing that you're lowering the average order value. So in this case, a guardrail metric would be the average order value. It has to stay stable, right? It has to stay the same as what it is right now. Then can we measure this goal with our current tools and infrastructure? So in this case, like, do we have everything we need to run a split test? Is our tracking already set up to be able to track visitors that go to version A versus version B? You have to answer that question. So in this case, it would be, let's say, no, we need to synchronize with the dev team and measurement, whatever. You need to contact the dev team and the measurement specialist in order to do this project and have the correct tracking set up. Then you should ask yourself how long you'll need to run this experiment for it to give you meaningful results, right? Because sometimes if you don't have enough traffic, it could take a very long time to have the answer you want. And since we want to increase conversion rate by 15% in the next 3 months, we need to have enough sample size to be able to answer that within 3 months, right? So you could say, based on our calculation on the amount of traffic we're getting, we'll need 100,000 visitors, which should take about 1 month. Great. And lastly, one thing you want to ask yourself is, do we need to monitor specific metrics after launch? For example, the guardrail metric, conversion rate. You'll need to keep an eye on those as the experiment goes along, because if let's say version B of your split test doesn't convert at all, you want to be able to pull the plug as fast as possible, right? So you'll need to monitor average order value and conversion rate, and you already have the capabilities of to do that, right? So you don't need to implement anything extra in this example. And then you do the same thing for the checkout page project. So again, the first question, it's 15% conversion rate. Second is where it differed the most. The other one, we had the ability to split test, which was crucial considering that there's a price change on the website and it's high season. All right. The testimonial in this example, since they're using a different platform, they can only add testimonial to the checkout page for all users. They don't have the ability to split test. So they won't, to answer the question, how will we know if the increase in conversion rate is due to the price change, to the high season, or because we added testimonial? Do we have a way to know if this increased the conversion rate? No, we don't. That's very important. Then you go on, maybe for the testimonial, again, AOV should remain stable, and it's pretty much the rest for everything else. But the main difference is that one can be split tested and the other one cannot, which make it very obvious that considering it's high season, you decide to choose to launch the product page redesign because you can split test at 80-20, right? Let's say 80 is the current page that you know converts good enough, and 20% would be the new design. And one thing that's great about that is, since it's high season very soon, if you realize that the 20%, the new design is performing really well and has a very high conversion rate, you can slowly increase the split and maybe 50-50 and eventually just having everyone on that new design and capture that extra revenue during high season. Not only doing that help you figure out exactly what caused the increase in conversion rate, but it also helped you capture additional revenue. As for the testimonial, you decide that you'll wait until high season is done and that you have a new kind of baseline for your conversion rate with this new design, and you'll launch the testimonials when there's not as many change on the website, so that it's easier to measure the impact. So you just decide to push back on the testimonial. And that's really the gist of it. As for the rest of the planning project goes on, we move on to the next stage, which is to plan and dispatch. You would do that as normally. It's just that this time, make sure to include the measurement specialist to make sure that they are aware that they need to implement the tracking for your project. Step 5, which is normally to choose the tool. Same thing again, it's just that this time make sure that it has the functionalities necessary for the tracking. If you're not sure, send that to your specialist. He'll take a look at the platform and let you know if what you need to measure is possible within that platform. 6, you build as you normally would. Step number 7 would be to QA. Again, as you normally would, but this time include the measurement specialist that he can go and test the tracking setup, make sure that the dashboard to monitor your guardrail metric and your goal metric are working properly. Step number 9, once you finally get to the data analysis, you'll finally be able to know if the project that you just spent all that time on yielded the result that you were hoping. And if not, at least you'll learn something and you will be building that feedback loop that allow you to move faster and just continue to grow even though the company is getting more complex. This is how you avoid stagnation. This is how you build momentum. That's how all the big companies are doing it. I know it's obscure when they say use data to grow your business, but that's one part of it. It's not sexy, it's just planning, but you'll save so much time. I've seen it happen. It's a simple shift that needs to happen at the organization wide. So it's simple but hard. But once it happened, that's how you get to the next level. So if you start to apply this approach in your organization, you won't just avoid stagnation, you'll start growing again. So go out there, try it out, and let me know how did it go for you. Because the reality is, if you're not doing this, you're guessing. And guessing at scale, as you saw earlier, it gets very expensive. So go out there, try it out. I've put a link in the description below where there's a checklist for you that you can use every time you start a new project. All right, see you next time.